As a member of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, you are part of the biggest union in Canada and New Brunswick. The services performed by our 20,000 CUPE workers affect everyone throughout the province. Without the work of our CUPE members within our locals and sublocals, life in New Brunswick would be very different. Together, we have the power to protect our collective bargaining rights. Our democratic right to join together to have a union did not come easily. Many struggles were fought so that we could have free collective bargaining to protect and improve our working conditions, benefits, wages, pensions, and job security to ensure we are able to adequately provide for our families. History will tell us that it was against the law to come together and even discuss forming unions. Those early workers who joined together were faced with deportation without hearing and met with armed thugs at the plant gates. With raw determination and conviction, they stood strong against the law to change the way of life for workers in Canada. They stood the test. The right to form a union with free collective bargaining became part of Canadian society. Our history is deep in New Brunswick. We have some of the finest unions in Canada. There have been many tests of determination and conviction. In 1917, the St. John police officers who stood together to form a union were fired and the Army brought in. They did not give up. They gathered signatures from property owners and had a recall of council. The new council hired them back, and in 1918, they became the first police union in North America. They stood the test. It was the grit and determination of those who came before us that forced governments and employers to recognize unions as part of our democracy. However, the right to belong to a union with free collective bargaining has been more tolerated than accepted by governments and employers. In 1976, we had the wage rollbacks. It showed government and employers they could interfere with free collective bargaining through legislation. In 1991, the government interfered with free collective bargaining with legislation that replaced negotiated settlements with 0% for over 50,000 New Brunswick workers, including those at municipalities and universities.
For the first time in the history of New Brunswick, the government introduced legislation in April of 1991, breaking signed legal contracts, taking $65 million from workers' paychecks.
Although we launched major demonstrations, one-day withdrawal of services, and a massive public relations campaign, the legislation stood. In 1991, the government even threatened to introduce back-to-work legislation against mine workers in Bathurst. Having got away with the wage freeze legislation of 1991, like any bully, the government again introduced legislation in 1992 to interfere with free collective bargaining and force a second year of no wage increase. We were tested again.
20,000 members of CUPE started the day angry and frustrated with the government they say has broken its word. They were geared up for a fight, and they weren't afraid to yell their insults right at Premier Frank McKenna.
Labor Relations Act states the union shall be decertified. But even the warnings do not seem to be influencing the strike. Carol Adams, CBC News, Fredericton.
Other provincial governments had forced legislation on their workers. Our premier thought he could do the same with threats of firings, a lawsuit of $27 million, and threats of mass decertification.
This union, CUPE in New Brunswick, really represents the only union virtually in Canada that's been unable to accept the reality of the financial times. All across the country, people have accepted restraint packages more severe than ours.
Prince Edward Island legislated a 7.5% wage rollback. Newfoundland legislated a 7-year wage freeze. With the solidarity of the CUPE members of '92, the legislation interfering with free collective bargaining was defeated.
The new deal states that all wages and benefits contained in CUPE contracts will be paid in full, effective today.
The 1992 CUPE members were one, and the government knew it. The legislation interfering with free collective bargaining was erased from the books. They stood the test. In 1995, the government threatened to introduce legislation that would severely weaken the collective bargaining power of municipal employees. With the success of 1992, we were able to stop the legislative threats. With a new government comes new challenges. Our court stenographers were forced on a long strike that lasted 133 days through 2000 and 2001 before reaching a fair settlement. The government introduced Bill 30 in February 2001, legislating an end to the hospital strike after only 10 hours. In August 2001, threats were again made to introduce back-to-work legislation to end the nursing home strike. Realizing we must stop the big stick government interference with free collective bargaining, CUPE New Brunswick has built brick by brick a wall of solidarity over the last 4 years. During the last round of bargaining for Local 1253, our school district workers received threats of back-to-work legislation. The 2002 provincial strike of Local 1418, our rehabilitation and therapy members, resulted in a freely negotiated settlement because we joined together to convince government they could not get away with back-to-work legislation. During the 2003 provincial strike of Local 1251, our correction officers, custodians, and human services counselors, the Premier made public threats of bringing in legislation to force their settlement on our members. With our CUPE New Brunswick Plan of Action and Solidarity Pack, government negotiated a settlement with Local 1251. Across Canada, public employees continue to be attacked. The British Columbia government brought in legislation that tore the no contracting out and job security articles from the collective agreements of hospital workers. 7,000 jobs were contracted out at half wages and no benefits. Last year, the BC government brought in legislation rolling the wages of hospital workers back 15%. In Newfoundland, back-to-work legislation resulting with 2 years of wage freezes ended a month-long legal strike by 20,000 members, where the government saved $60 million. We saw them carrying the coffins representing the death of free collective bargaining. In Quebec, the government has introduced legislation interfering with job security, paving the way for more contracting out. Representatives of New Brunswick are visiting these provinces and getting lessons on how to divide and destroy the collective bargaining rights of all workers. Our government continues testing the waters to see if they could get away with wage freezes or rollbacks like Newfoundland or BC. From our collective bargaining plan of action, we formed a coalition of 19 union organizations, distributed newsletters, and ran radio ads on protecting free collective bargaining. At public budget consultation meetings, CUPE members turned out by the hundreds to deliver strong messages protecting free collective bargaining. Our collective show of solidarity has convinced the government that they cannot bring in the budget that freezes or roll back wages or contract out jobs like other provinces. Last year at the CUPE New Brunswick Convention, Resolution Number 9 was unanimously passed to mobilize our 20,000 members if government interferes with the free collective bargaining process. Again, our collective bargaining plan of action and solidarity pack was tested when the government forced our hospital workers on strike last year. The Premier threatened to legislate our hospital workers back to work, and like 2001 would have, if CUPE New Brunswick did not have the Solidarity Pack mobilizing our 20,000 members. With our CUPE NB Solidarity Pack, support from the New Brunswick Federation of Labor and Coalition, our hospital members were able to freely negotiate a settlement, not to have one legislated down upon them with wage freezes and rollbacks, like Newfoundland and British Columbia. The 14% over 4-year settlement of our hospital workers also stopped contracting out last year, as stated by Health Minister Elvie Robichaud. Quote, "It likely won't be possible, at least for the length of a 4-year contract, for the province to outsource services such as laundry. However, the challenges continue." Hospital laundry, dietary, cleaning, as well as ambulance services are all under review by government. Our Red Cross home support workers have been forced on strike to get a living wage. Our court stenographers and nursing home members are being forced on strike to get the wage increase that the Lord government agreed to with our hospital members last year. That's right, 2 more strikes to get what the government already agreed to.
Here we go again.
Again, the Premier has threatened to legislate our members back to work and destroy free collective bargaining. When your collective bargaining rights were threatened to be stripped away over the last 4 years, all of CUPE supported you. We must stand together again against the threats by the Lord government for our members being forced on strike now. Our sisters and brothers being forced on strike will stand strong against the legislative attack on free collective bargaining, but cannot take on the Lord government alone. The fight to protect free collective bargaining affects all of us. The many struggles, sacrifices, and gains made over the years will be on the line again. If Lord is allowed to snuff out the free collective bargaining rights of striking CUPE members, you will be next. Let there be no mistake. Each and every one of us knows what free collective bargaining rights mean to us. Our incomes, benefits, pensions, our very jobs are all determined through collective bargaining and the solidarity of our members. Each and every one of us has benefited from collective bargaining because those who came before us fought for the right to form unions and negotiate contracts. The New Brunswick Federation of Labor understands the importance of our challenge and is with us once again.
I want to be clear, the Federation of Labor will support CUPE and will continue to support CUPE because
we have the support of CUPE National, representing our 550,000 members.
It's important for CUPE as a national union to send a message to all of our employers that we will defend our rights to free collective bargaining that so many fought for, those who have gone before us.
Our striking members refuse to be defeated by legislation that interferes with free collective bargaining. They deserve our respect and support. We will all benefit or lose from the outcome. We must join together to protect free collective bargaining again. Your income benefits, your future depends upon it. Like you, our striking members need all of our support to reach a negotiated settlement and maintain collective bargaining rights for everyone.
All the sacrifices that the public employees and their leaders did in this province is going down the drain unless the workers of this province decide enough is enough.
Here we go again. The phone will ring again. I'll be her fool again. I will.